Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Oriental Rug Mart, featuring a variety of hand-knotted and machine-made rugs from around the world, committed to helping people transform spaces through the art of textiles, located at Eastview Mall and online at orientalrugmart.com. And live, presenting an evening with Roseanne Cash and John Leventhal, Tuesday, September 23rd at 8 p.m. at the Theater at Innovation Square. Tickets available online at theaterais.com.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. We'll make our first connection this hour with a question. What causes you the most guilt? What action in your own past do you most regret? Maybe wish you could change or struggle to confront in a way that perhaps has continued to be a blur or blocked out of your memory even? What makes you feel shame or is so jarring that you've distorted the details in your own mind? I would think that we all have something that we would like back. And consider this. Imagine a young girl, 4 years old, playing with her close friend. I'm going to turn now to the New York Times glowing review of a book called Poor Dear for more on this. Quote, midway through Claire Oshetsky's beautiful, terrifying sophomore novel, a mother asks her daughter, "Did you leave Agnes Bickford in that cooler to die, Bunny?" This turns out to be the central question of Poor Dear. Bunny is Margaret Murphy, our protagonist. Agnes Bickford is her childhood best friend and neighbor. On a rainy day when the girls were 4 years old, they raced out of their respective houses to play. Later, Margaret's mother found her daughter silently cowering under her dining room table. Agnes's mother found her daughter dead in a tool shed. What happened? Who's at fault? And is this person deserving of forgiveness? These uncertainties haunt just about everybody in the novel, especially Margaret herself. But she doesn't want to talk or think about what led to her friend's demise, and that's where Poor Dear comes in, end quote. Now, the deer in this book, in Poor Dear, spelled D-E-E-R, a play on the phrase Poor Dear, D-E-A-R. For Margaret, Poor Dear becomes her own imaginative creation that challenges her in various ways to engage with the past and her responsibility and her emotion. It's an actual talking deer that makes its way into Margaret's mind or her writing or even her hotel room. And Poor Dear can be brutal and direct and demanding. Poor Dear is going to get Margaret to confront what really happened, how her friend Agnes really died, and what it means to feel the burden of trauma. Author Claire Oshetsky has won the 2025 Janet Heidinger Kafka Prize from the University of Rochester. The Kafka Prize is an annual award listed for the best book-length work of prose fiction written by an American woman, presented by the University of Rochester's Susan B. Anthony Institute for Gender and Women's Studies and the Department of English. And the name of the prize comes from a promising young editor who died in a car accident. We typically have the winners on. It's always a great honor to do that. And when Chad Post reached out to me, Chad reads more than anybody I think I know. But when Chad reached out, it was like, you've stop what you're doing. You got a new baby, doesn't matter. Find time to read this book. You've got to read this book. And we've got a chance to welcome the author here to the studio to discuss guilt, grief, our fragile memories, and Poor Dear. Claire Oshetsky, author of the award-winning Poor Dear, congratulations on the Kafka Prize, and thank you for being with us this hour.
Thank you for inviting me, Evan.
Chad W. Post, co-founder and publisher of Open Letter Books. Welcome back. Nice to see you.
Always fun to be here.
And Taylor Thomas, founder and owner of Archivist Books, who gets a lot of credit here for the nomination for this prize. Thank you for being here with us as well.
Thanks for having me.
Why did this book move you so much, Taylor?
I had never read a book that had guilt and grief in such a tangible way. Like having that sort of sensation separate from yourself as an entity that literally haunts you physically was just something I'd never experienced before. I think specifically with the way that Poor Dear consistently makes her confront her own lies as the story continues was just, I'd never read something like that. So it was great.
What about you, Chad?
I am very much obsessed with like structures in books and how they're kind of put together and the sort of craft of it. And this book is amazing for that reason. Like the way that it's all put together, the sort of iterations and repetitions at the beginning and the end. It's a brilliant, tight book. So in addition to everything that you're saying, I also think the craft of this is the most high level.
Yeah. When I was reading, not just the book, but it was interesting to me to read the wide range of reviews There's got to be a bad review somewhere of this book. I don't think there actually is. But a lot of the reviews note that this is a sophomore effort, but Claire's first two books have some things in common. And I wonder for you, since you literally read around the world, is it rare, and did you have the feeling when you read this like something profound and new? Did it feel that way to you?
Yeah, there is something. Yeah, there's definitely something new, and there's definitely a very interesting voice and a very interesting way of presenting this idea of an unreliable narrator that we as the reader are working through and watching her work through, coming up with a narrative to define her life and to deal with that kind of sense of like, you remember this thing very clearly, but, maybe there's little fuzzy edges to it and telling it. And I love that sort of situation that you're put in as a reader where you're having to sort of figure things out, sort of work through what the prose is doing. And like I said, I just think it's like just wonderfully written.
When you reached out to me about this book, when I first picked it up, I remembered some of the conversations we've had in the past about memory. And about how unreliable our own memories can be, but for different reasons. Sometimes grief and trauma, which we'll talk about with Claire coming up here, is a cause of a memory block or a blur or sort of a refusal to confront something. Sometimes it's just that we don't remember everything the way we thought we did. I mean, I remember, not that I always want to cite Malcolm Gladwell, but he had a very interesting conversation about if you ask people, where were you on 9/11? Everybody seems really certain about that because it was kind of the seminal moment in society. And yet a ton of people are wrong. Like they'll tell you, oh, I was at my aunt's, we were on vacation, I was watching it. And they actually were there the next weekend.
Yeah.
And they were in an entirely different place. I mean, like, it's just interesting how your memory works in general.
Yeah. And like, especially, I shouldn't speak to this because of the nature of the book and the trauma, but like with trauma too, like sometimes you dull those edges or tell it in a different way that you are less responsible or you're there. What you're saying too, like the Challenger explosion is one of the ones that strikes home for me because I definitely remember seeing that in school and watching it live, and definitely did not happen.
Really? Oh,
I know it didn't.
So I was 7.
Yep.
And in my mind, it's one of the only memories of that school year.
Yep.
Of watching that clunky TV in the corner of the room.
Same.
I feel like I can see it in my brain. And what you're telling me is I might not actually have been even in school that day.
Yep.
Isn't that wild? So, Claire Oshetsky, again, congratulations on this prize. Can I start just by asking you, what does it mean to be winning prizes for your fiction here? What did this one mean to you?
The experience of writing something that is so personal and feels like it's just my own experience that I'm writing about. This is a very autobiographical book in many ways. And having other people say, oh, I have felt that way. It's a magical thing about fiction. And I'm not used to it. I don't think I'll ever get used to it, that you can sit in a room and meditate in a very solitary way about something that's important that happened to you and have other people say, I understand. I have read this and I have felt that way. And yes, I'm never going to get over that. Even though as a reader I've had that happen, it's a different thing to have it happen as a writer.
Well, I mean, that means that certainly not just a Kafka Prize, but you're probably getting feedback. And does that mean you're getting even more reception than you expected for a book like this?
Yes, it's a very sad book, and it doesn't have what would typically be called a happy ending. And I felt that the book, that the topic was serious enough that I didn't want it to wrap it up in a bow at the end, and that people were okay with that. I just find it wonderful. I'm very happy about it.
When you say that it's autobiographical, it's interesting that for you, this is a book that is so personal and autobiographical, and yet for so many people, it's so relatable. So relatable in ways that the way we interact with either grief or guilt, or our questions of our own sort of culpability and something that we wish we could change. I wonder if that's a surprise, given that how directly personal and specific the book is.
Exactly. That's exactly what is surprising to me. Also, that the world I'm writing about is Milltown in the 50s, And I'm writing about an era that most of my readers weren't around for. And I'm asking them to believe things like that it was perfectly normal for 4-year-old kids to go out and play. And in fact, parents would say, go out and play. And many other things that are really alien to the world today. And that they went along with that. And also the specific incident of a child locking another child in a airtight space, that was actually possible and happening all the time in the 50s, that it was a good place for kids to hide, and kids did die that way. And as a matter of fact, I locked my best friend in a cooler, and my friend's mother found her in time. But I began to want to explore that, like how could it have happened differently? Of course, it was just a matter of minutes that child would have been dead and 2 families would have been devastated. And it felt like a good fictional subject, personal subject to spend some time with.
How old were you when that happened?
4.
4, yeah.
It's really my first memory. And I hesitate to call it traumatic because it had a good ending. It's not something I dwell on, but it's very vivid. And I remember the terror. I didn't understand. I'm sure I didn't understand that it was a life-threatening situation, but I did run away in terror that I couldn't open this. And just that it could have happened in another way. I wanted to meditate on that personally, and then it became the book.
To me, it's very interesting that you say it's really your first memory, because it didn't end tragically. And yet it embedded in your memory.
Yes, and the other weird thing that is also very typical of families of that era is we never talked about it. And, it was like, I finally, after the book was published, I called up my brother and I said, do you remember this? And he remembered it, even though he wasn't there. He remembered what the other mother said to my mother, and when she found her daughter, which was, my daughter was blue in the face. And she was yelling this across the fence in the 2 backyards. And we moved away very shortly after that, so I didn't have to live with this family next door. But he remembered that. Yeah, she was blue in the face. That's the first thing he told me when I said, do you remember when that happened? And we had never talked about it in all those years. And it was embedded in his memory as well, though, as something that had happened in our childhood or didn't happen in our childhood, I guess.
So certainly, had it ended tragically, your own experience of possible guilt and grief would have been very different. Did you feel any guilt over the years as for something that almost happened?
No.
That's interesting.
I was interested in that ethically and as a fictional thing to explore as well. We assign guilt to ourselves in terms of outcomes and not in terms of our actions. And that is kind of weird because you can do the same thing, and if it turns out it was just a lucky break and nothing bad happened, then we go on with our lives. But it can turn out very differently, and then we never forgive ourselves.
Yeah. Just thinking about the little snapshots of memory. I was driving back from Chautauqua Lake to Cleveland one summer with my twin brother in the passenger seat, and he asked me if I was good to drive. We've been working so much at the summer camp. I said yes. And at one point in driving, we go from the left lane to the right lane to the right lane to the right lane to the shoulder. And my twin brother looked at me and he said, if you're watching on YouTube, he said you were just, fully asleep. And the car is about to go off the road and he grabbed the wheel and nothing happened. And I remember just sort of jerking awake and him saying, we're stopping the car. You're not driving. Like, you nearly killed us. And the idea of nearly killed us is so different. I mean, like it would have been another, maybe 1 to 2 seconds before our lives would have been either over or changed. It's amazing how your memory, why that embedded, because that wasn't a tragic moment, and yet I still remember it. How did you as a writer try to work through how a 4-year-old girl who is getting older and becomes 16 years old, how you are processing something that did end up becoming tragic?
Because that's fictional and I haven't had that experience, I did research of other authors who had less luck in that situation. One of them is John Gardner, who wrote a short story called Redemption that begins, it's a short story, it's fiction, but it begins with the true story of how he killed his brother in a farming accident. And it's something he never got over. There's also a poet, Gregory Orr, who killed his brother in a hunting accident. And all of his poetry are about that. There's the memoir, Half a Life by Darren Strauss, that when Darren was a very young new driver, he hit a classmate of his and she died. And none of them got over it. They just never got over it. And that is something I didn't want to have for my fictional character. I wanted this character to forgive herself. And that struggle of making a realistic yet redemptive story became kind of the main problem to solve for me as a fiction writer.
We're talking to Claire Oshetsky. Claire is the author of the award-winning Poor Dear. And I should ask Chad and Taylor where they want you to pick up the book here. I mean, so this beautiful book that we're going to be talking about this hour, where can we find this book here, Taylor?
I am selling copies at Archivist Books. That's on 772 Monroe Avenue.
Chad's ready. Also, he has to hit the cough button. Go ahead.
Hit the cough button. Also on tomorrow, Saturday at 3:00 at the Great Hall in Rush Reed's Library at the University of Rochester, Claire will be reading, and we'll have an event for Meliora Weekend, and there will be copies of the book there for purchase as well.
Okay, so if you can attend the event tomorrow, that's great. What time's the event?
3:00.
3:00 tomorrow. And again, Archivist is where?
On 772 Monroe Avenue.
Okay. Tell people what you do at Archivist Books.
So Archivist Books is a bookstore that specializes in all queer literature. It's kind of like a love letter to myself. I was always an avid reader, but never saw any of my identities really reflected in the books that I read. So that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to do here is like having marginalized communities come into a space and see themselves reflected on the shelves. So yeah, that's like the main goal is just to kind of make people feel welcome and heard by putting their stories on the shelves.
Support local books, right? Support local bookstores. Great way to do that. So different chances for listeners to pick up the book. But again, the larger themes of this book I think are really relatable. We're going to talk a little bit more in a moment about the creation of the Poor Dear character. I'd like to talk a little bit about that without giving too much away if we can. But let me also ask Chad Post to describe a little bit about this process, this award and what it means in this community, you think?
Yeah, so the award's really important. It's been around for 50 years. Claire's the 49th recipient. I'm not sure how that math works, but there we are. And there's the list of winners is like astronomically impressive. I mean, the first one was Jessamine West. We got Toni Morrison in 1977. There's Ann Patchett received the award. It's a very prestigious award. And the way that the sort of prize works is that publishers submit their titles, and then we have a group of 5 judges. We each split that apart into about 30 books each, 35 books each. So it's a pretty healthy number of submissions that come in, and then each one of us brings 2 books. Yeah, well, you guys bring 2 books to the finalists. I bring 3 because I'm no good at this, and I want everything to be awarded. So then we read all of the finalists, and then we choose one of the winners. And it's like a really, actually, like the best committee that I've ever been on, and it's super fun to talk to people who are like avid readers, like you say, and very invested in the books and in why they deserve to win. So it's wonderful.
And the prize, even though, I mean, you mentioned Morrison and Patchett over the years, is it fair to say that the prize is not designed for super established high wattage writers at the time? There is
within the rules, you can only have a certain number of titles. So if you publish 6 books, you're not eligible. I think the number is 3 full-length books that this could be like essentially your 4th book. I might have that part wrong, but like 3rd, 4th book essentially is where we are in terms of limiting. And then if it's a collection of short stories, a certain number of the stories have to have not appeared in magazines to be original. So it's people who are like not at the, I don't want to say at the start of their career, but are somewhat like at the point where you're established, but are ready to, be rewarded for what you've done.
The way I've thought about it over the years in our conversations is you all, through this prize, are helping. So I'm not reading 35 books a year on the committee. You're helping me find authors who deserve more widespread attention and maybe have some, but aren't household names.
Absolutely. And there is, we did this time was the first time, I think, ever on one of the Substacks I run is the 3%problem.substack.com. We listed the finalists. So the 11 finalists are all there. So if you read Poor Dear, go buy Poor Dear, buy it from Archivist Books, support everyone local, read that. But then you can look at the list of the finalists and there's a lot of great books on there. Yeah. Very varied. There's some short story collections. There's some other novels. It's a wonderful list. I mean, it was hard to narrow it down to 11. It's supposed to be 10 again. I'm not good at this. But it's a really great resource for people looking for things to read that are by women that are really important and interesting books.
Let me wax poetic a little bit about this, while also noting how bad you are at narrowing down lists. Because Chad loves to read, and he wants everything to be awarded, which is great. And not everything, but a lot. He's really terrible at that, isn't he? Sometimes you got to pick one, Chad.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so, but here's why I want to wax poetic. I just have so much appreciation for the work that you do with this, because I'm feeling a little despair lately. And the despair starts with, we had a really lovely conversation, and I am not coming down on anybody. A lovely conversation about what is going on with the sort of social media addiction, screen addiction, and the bell-to-bell bans of cell phones in schools. And we had a 16-year-old on, a very thoughtful 16-year-old, really thoughtful student, who said she really can't read books because when she reads books, she can read for 5 minutes and she needs to check TikTok. And she just can't get away from it. And so she doesn't really read. Doesn't read for pleasure, will read sometimes for school if she has to, but can't get through books and can't read for an hour, can't read for 20 minutes. I bring this up only, not again with no derision, just observing that is a lot of us in society now because of the changing habits that we have, the addictions, the attention spans. And I get nervous that we're going to have even fewer authors find audiences, because when you look at the amount of reading people do for pleasure, for leisure, you've probably seen some of those studies over the years, like it starts to disturb you a little bit.
Yeah, although I get to play my super optimist on your show every single time.
I know. I become the doomsayer, and then you come in to be like, no, it's going to be okay.
Anyone who knows me is like, this is a role reversal that we have never expected. But I do believe that like there is going to be a sort of shift. I think it might be signaled recently among political events that have happened, in which people are going to look for authenticity and for more sustained connection with human beings. And I think that books are a good medium for that. And yes. Like I'm locked into my phone. I'm constantly having text messages from people. I'm in these conversations. And I've known in the past that I've had a hard time too. Like I'll have to set things aside, pay attention. I feel like reading a book for an hour more is where you get to see like how it's put together. Like otherwise you're just getting glimpses of stuff. And I've noticed recently, because I don't use social media anymore at all, that like life is better. It's much easier. I've become more adjusted, and the reading process is much more fulfilling than it was. And I don't think I'm alone in this. I've had sort of senses that people are like backing away. So my optimism is that yes, that's obviously going to be the case for many years of people being, I got to check TikTok. I got to see what's going on. But I think we're going to start shifting away. I think AI is pushing us away back towards like books, back towards human
like a countercultural movement away from tech addiction?
If we could have a real counterculture in this society, I am there for it.
Okay. Are you optimistic too on this?
I try to be. I don't know if I'm as optimistic as you, Chad, but I feel like as someone who has had TikTok and social media addiction and phone addiction is just us seeking entertainment. And I think if we can like reframe the fact that books have consistently been entertainment, I mean, that's how I kept myself entertained. I know that it's not as visual, as far as like videos and things like that. But at least in my circle, I feel like most of the people love to just sit down and read as like a solitary enjoyment.
I think that's a good way to frame it. Another way to think of it, 1 week ago, probably right now on this program, Kit Miller made a really important point about attention. And our attention has been commodified. I mean, we know that it is a valuable asset for corporations, companies, social media platforms. They want your attention, and they value it, and they sell it, and they know how to get it from you. And so the challenge Kit put to us is value your attention more than these corporations do. And if you're doom scrolling, you're not really valuing your attention. And if you're reading, that is a great way to value your attention. That is a way to find growth and understanding and all kinds of good things that are not doom scrolling. I like that framing. Go ahead, Chad.
I do too. And I think there's something about like just long form narrative in relation to that. Like if you're listening to an audiobook, you're listening to a podcast, you're watching something and like engaging with it, that it's the attention, like you say, and like not allowing it to be commodified by TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, wherever. But also just that the process of like engaging in something more than 30 seconds. Like when you see, I watch my kids like just like flip through things. I watch like, I know that students like, and I've read studies about music in particular, that music that's crafted for TikTok, you have like 1 second and then someone moves on. Like to reframe like what you're saying and paying attention and to put that emphasis onto a longer form narrative is going to make a huge difference for like how you think about yourself, how you think about the world. Like it changes everything if you're giving something a sustained amount of attention. So I think that's super important, but it is also so hard in our world where we're getting bombarded by information nonstop. It's just like the explosion of like how information proliferates and becomes easier and easier and easier to like share and to like make more of it. And this is where, as we've talked about, my fear with AI is that it's just like overwhelming everything.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And one other point on this that Chad's comment made me think of, and then I want to get Claire's thought on all this as an author in the room here. I do think that there is a way that modern technology allows us to choose not to engage with hard emotions. So we start to feel sadness. Sadness is a core part of your life. Life is inherently pretty sad. It's tragic at times. And you can't just will that away by doom scrolling or checking TikTok or texting someone. You can try to chase that away. And I think what tech does is it, instead of letting us sit with it, when I read a book like this, I sometimes just need time to reread a paragraph and then just sit for a second. I'm not a fast reader. I'm a fast reader for show purposes. Mm-hmm. I am not a fast reader of works like this when I want to really absorb it. And that's kind of by design, because I want to sit in silence with it and ask myself what I'm feeling and what I'm relating to. And I think if there's this temptation to go like, no, I don't want to feel that. Like, comedians, people have observed this long before I have. But it's true. We can just get away from hard feelings, we think, and chase it with this stuff. And I don't think that is a good habit. I think this asks us to work through how it makes us feel and to not run from that and to maybe take some time with that. And I think that's healthy, but it's also hard. And maybe we'll relearn that habit as part of the countercultural movement that you want, Chad Post.
Oh, yeah. I will lead this movement if people will let me.
Grab that torch and the pitchforks. Let's go. Okay, that's enough of me waxing like weird on this subject here. What does all this strike as the author, Claire, here of the book that we've been talking about? Are you concerned about habits and trends and technology and the effect on your possible future readers?
I've been online since 1995 and was very involved with the technology itself as a tech writer in Silicon Valley. And what I've observed is the internet, we say the internet is forever, but actually the internet is not forever. It's very ephemeral. Nothing about 1995 is available anymore. You can go to the Wayback Machine and there's like these little broken threads. It's gone. What happened to MySpace? What happened to those early ventures? They're just gone. Anytime a media organization wants to change what's online, they can just get rid of what they don't like on their sites anymore. And we think TikTok is forever. Well, everybody thought MySpace was forever. So I think that's going to happen, much like what Chad said, that people will just get bored. There's only so much you can do in a TikTok video. The aspect ratio is all wrong for things people want to show, for one thing, like these Fred Astaire dances, and like there's just Ginger Rogers or just Fred Astaire. It doesn't work for many reasons, and people are copying each other. There's very little originality there. So yeah, first there's this brokenness of the past. There's no history with the internet. That's going to continue, and what will survive as an expression of our era is a book. And I just believe this so strongly. Like this physical thing is just so much more going to be around. Try to find a book published in 1995. It's not so hard. 1925. It's not so hard. So I think just the physicality of things. That's why people are turning back to vinyl. I think for music, that digital things are ephemeral and will continue to just float away. And culture people are going to return to physical media, just naturally.
All right, last question on the subject, and then what we'll do is we'll take a break, and I want to spend the rest of the hour really kind of working more through what especially the guests, the judges, think of this outstanding novel. It's called Poor Dear. Claire Oshetsky is the author, and Claire is with us in studio, the winner of the 2025 Kafka Prize. I've been wrestling a lot lately with how I feel about how AI can be used to complete a song, a composition, a book, a poem, a presentation, a speech. And I don't want to be an absolutist. I want to acknowledge that there are different lines in different places. We had a conversation earlier this week with musicians who pretty flatly rejected the idea that you can you get writer's block, you got half a song written, but put it in a Suno, and Suno will finish it for you, and it's still your song. And I argued, I don't think it is. And the musicians mostly agreed. But there are some very smart people in tech who have pushed back and have shared some really interesting things with me. And I'm grateful for the back and forth. I'm working through how I feel about all this. What I know is that I'd be very surprised if Claire said, well, I had half of Poor Dear done and I didn't know what to do with it. And I put it into AI and it finished it for me. And that's what you're holding. I would be very surprised at that. But you could have done that. And there are people doing it today. Writers with writer's block in music and poetry and literature are using AI to finish it for them. And I'm uncomfortable with that. I don't think that's the same as finding a musical collaborator or saying, Taylor, I don't know how to finish this poem. I've got a couple ways. What do you think? I think that that interaction is different than just AI. Do it. But I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about the possibility of what tech can do for writers like yourself, Claire?
Well, sometimes I will ask ChatGPT, what should I write next? And the ideas are really bad. So I'm just like, but the thing that's weird about it is they sound good. They're like, oh, that sounds good. But if you actually look at it, no, there's nothing there. And I don't think there's a capability in the technology for doing creative things or even true things because it's gathering from a database that isn't fact-checked. It's just like the great unwashed whatever that's out there. So I'm not afraid of AI. I don't think it's creative, and I don't think that's going to change. There are a lot of people who are trying to talk us into that because they'll make money if we buy into it. But I don't see. There have been some pretty interesting things about novels about books that use AI as a foil, and you can tell this is AI. So I don't think that's going to get better.
But if you had a book in your hand and someone said, hey, this author hit a writer's block, put in a half-finished work, 30,000 words, and got another 30,000 to complete it from AI, would you say that's still the author's book?
I don't see that as reality.
Okay.
I don't think that would ever happen, and I don't think AI will ever get there. There's like this nirvana of AI that people are afraid of, that it'll actually take over creative work, and I don't think it has the capability, and I don't think it ever will.
Well, let me give a shout out to Kevin Ceres, who has been really generous with me and followed up and keeps challenging me on this in really smart and good ways. And I just want to thank him for that, because he's what he's showing me is that the quality of the prompt does matter if you're using AI. But if you write really sophisticated, long, thoughtful prompts, you do get better stuff. And I'm a little nervous about that, but I mean, it is part of the reality. So we're going to keep talking about that. That's for another day. Let's take this break. Let's come back, talk more about the book. The book is called Poor Dear. It's available now at Archivist Books in Rochester. We'll tell you about an event coming up tomorrow. Claire Oshetsky is the author and the winner of the 2025 Kafka Prize at the University of Rochester. We'll come right back on Connections.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, believing an informed and engaged community is a connected one. marycariola.org.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Chad Post reminded us that there were a lot of books that could have won the Kafka Prize. We're talking about the one that did, but if you want to see a longer list, where's the Substack? Where can people learn more?
3% Problem, all spelled out, .substack.com.
And what is happening tomorrow, Chad?
Tomorrow, Claire will be reading at 3 o'clock at the Great Hall in Rush Rees Library on the University of Rochester's campus, and we'll be there to sign books as well.
Okay, 3 o'clock tomorrow, Rush Rees, for that event. Taylor Thomas, founder and owner of Archivist Books. Do you love it when people come in off the street that you've never met and it's just like, show me something good? That's got to be the best, right?
That's probably what I love the most about my job. It's just being able to direct someone to something that I just feel like they need to read. And when I wrote that I was talking about Poor Dear, I had so many people that were like, this book changed my life.
Wow.
So yeah, it's cool.
All right, so if you're just joining us, the book is called Poor Dear. It is, even in the author's own words, it's a sad book. It's not just a pat, easy, happy ending. It is a challenging book. It is a book that explores guilt and grief, largely through the lens of a young girl who was growing up, but she was 4 years old, and her 4-year-old best friend dies in an accident, and she feels this terrible sense of guilt, or really maybe denies it. And the Poor Dear becomes this mechanism to sort of confront things. But tell me a little bit more about when people are sharing their feelings about this. Clearly, this book is connected with a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that when thinking about your affinity for kind of not feeling, so like you said, sometimes people just scroll to not feel an emotion. And I feel like reading this book, so I read it first, maybe within a few hours, and then I read it again and took notes in my journal because it was something that I felt so deeply about, the fact that grief is always there, regardless if we pay attention to it or not. It's still existing in our bodies. And I think this book kind of made me slow down and realize that maybe, as simple as it sounds, facing the things that we've gone through and really kind of making peace with that can just change the trajectory of your life. And I feel like Margaret's life started once she confronted Poor Dear. So,
do you also feel like there's something here about being maybe gentle with ourselves?
I think now more than ever. I think it's so necessary to be gentle. And I will be honest, I don't read a lot of sad stuff because I like to read to just kind of take my mind off of things.
Life's hard enough?
Life's hard enough, I just want to read something fun, silly. So this was definitely not in my wheelhouse, but I think it was so necessary, especially now, to just realize that, things are hard, but facing them is what gets us through it. So,
Claire, can I ask you to describe for listeners a little bit about the creation of the character Poor Dear, D-E-E-R. Again, if listeners are hearing this and not seeing the book, here's the book if you're watching on YouTube. Tell us about Poor Dear.
I've already spoken about how I was trying to write a story where a bad thing happens to a child who's innocent but carries the guilt forward in life, and wanted a happy ending for that child, and to write a book where there was resolution and forgiveness. And as I wrote it, I felt like I was denying myself that capability. I would write a scene that would be pretty nice, that people were being nice to the girl. She was getting over her trauma. And then I'd say, no, that feels too easy. I need to revise the scene. And it just happened naturally that I kept the good scene and then rewrote, to have it be probably, it would be more like this for this child, that she wouldn't forgive herself so easily. And I fell into that pattern because of my own editorial voice telling me, no, that would never happen that way. And then I embodied, I guess you could call it the editorial voice in me, the critical voice who became Poor Dear.
Chad Post, you talked about why you love the structure of this book. How would you describe the actual Poor Dear for listeners?
Oh, it's interesting because one thing we haven't talked about here that we did in the book club that took place just before coming here to the radio station is like the Catholic imagery and the various religious imagery that shows up in the book, the flood, the pear tree, there's the priest, there's a lot of like Catholic things that show up in there. And I think that's really super interesting and does then with Poor Dear, you tied Poor Dear into Mary when we were talking earlier with the coloring of the blue. And I personally, this is like maybe not answering your question, but with Poor Dear, one of the things I will always remember is the description of the teeth chewing on her hair and like the flat yellow teeth grabbing the hair. And I was like, oh my God, this is like so visceral and so like visual and reminded me of like a David Lynch scene of some sort. So I really like that part, but I think it works as a device. It works incredibly well as like that reflection of like stopping the unreliable narrator from continuing down their path and causing some sort of obstacle of reflection. And that's really important to like how the book's structured, where you have the 4-year-old where as a reader, you know that a trauma will stand out in someone's mind and you'll remember it in various ways. But also a 4-year-old is one where it's like, how much do you really remember around that day? You might remember things, but they're a little fuzzy. And maybe you did do this, maybe you didn't do this. And the Poor Dear pushing back on that makes the tension work really well for like the first 2/3 of the book as she's trying to figure out who she is and what the story is and what the narrative of her life is up till age 16.
Poor Dear can be brutal.
Yep.
Can I?
Direct.
Do you mind if I read just a passage?
Not at all.
I'm just going to read a passage from when Margaret was 7, and this just gives you a sense of the interaction and how brutal Poor Dear could be when Margaret started to feel good things. Sometimes Margaret would tell herself there was no Poor Dear riding on her back or crouched in a corner of her bedroom at night. Then again, she could feel the weight she carried. She could see Poor Dear's blank eyes staring out at her in the dark. On very bad nights, Poor Dear liked to say to Margaret, "I'm very tired. Turn down the silken covers on your little bed." And then the musky brute would crawl into bed next to Margaret and throw her cold, swampy legs around the girl, pinning her down and pouring bad dreams into her ear. Whenever the smallest good thing came along in Margaret's life, whenever she realized she was happy, say, maybe another girl smiled at her at the playground, or a pretty stone on the ground caught Margaret's eye, there Poor Dear would be, weeping and screeching, "You don't deserve happy things, you stupid girl, when you took them all away from your friend." Poor Dear is mean. Our psyches can be mean. Our own, we can be very. That's brutal. That's robbing someone of happiness every time they start to even feel happy. That's tough.
I think that's true, though, that a child would behave that way. But I need to tell you that the part you read is sourced through the Frog Prince, and is identical in many ways to the story of the Frog Prince. And I created for Margaret a very limited bunch of books that she's able to read, and she returns to them in her storytelling. So the Frog Prince, the frog really does crawl into bed with that little girl and forces her to say what she did wrong and atone for it. So I loved that part of the writing, even if it's just for myself, and people don't always recognize the allusions to the Bible or to Hans Christian Andersen, and that's where that was inspired by as well.
For those who are just connecting with your work for the first time, this is your second book. Tell us about your first book.
The first book that was published by Echo is called Chouette, and it's a story about a woman who gives birth to an owl. That's it was also
That's all we're gonna get.
It's the best tagline.
semi-autobiographical in some ways. But, that one came out of needing to get through Stuart Little in my third grade class. And have you read that book lately? It's really scary.
No.
A woman gives birth to a mouse. It's by E.B. White, the guy who wrote Charlotte's
I
Web.
don't remember that part. Do you?
No.
I
Oh,
remember
well-
reading it, but I don't remember that.
Yeah, she gives birth to a mouse, and she's very vindictive towards her little mouse baby. So, yeah, look it up. So I was like, of course the mom would not be so happy. Yeah, so that was what inspired Chouette.
Okay. And so,
It's about trying to deal with, I think every mom has, no matter how good your baby is, it's like a little alien in your life that appears one day, and you have to, especially your first child, figure out how to keep it alive. And that's what the book's about.
yeah. My second son was born in July. I'm in that phase right now. It's like, boy, this is a lot of work. You're doing nothing for yourself here.
Yeah, nobody really acknowledges that. It's like, oh, your baby, you must be so happy. And it's very disorienting.
That is definitely one word for it. I mean, he's really lovely. He's great.
Yeah, of course.
But whew, no. So that's Chouette.
Yes.
And for some of the reviewers who have seen similarities, that I thought one of the interesting reviews said, if given these two books, you could understand that they are the same author, even if you weren't told they were the same author. Is that a compliment to you? I think that's a compliment.
Both of them, I just really wrote how I felt the sentence should go. And I'm not surprised they sound similar, but I don't know what exactly makes them similar.
Have you read Chouette?
Yeah, because it was a finalist for the prize as well a couple of years ago. I think that makes sense. Like, it feels there's a certain honesty and directness in the prose, that there is something similar in that tone, but they are different books in structure and in focus. But I get that. I think that's a compliment. I always think that's a compliment when you can tell, like, someone's got something that's realized, and it doesn't feel like AI, where it feels like generic. Someone who's a real writer has, like you, a really clear, like, sense of writing and of voice, of tone.
You want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think identifiable voices is so important. And I know, like, after I read Poor Dear, I was like, I have to read all your other work, because it resonated so well with me. And I felt like you have a voice that is, like, very, like, honed. And I'm just really, I thought it was great.
And you do have a new book coming out.
Yes.
Yes, it's also written in first person, and it feels like a different voice to me, but also the same. That, it's surprising to me that a sentence will just sort of write itself in a way, like, this is the word I need next. And it's not surprising that they sound similar. I hope not too similar. I hope a little similar, that people are like, I liked your last book. I hope I like the next one.
No. So tell us about the next book.
It's called Evil Genius, and it comes out in February 2026. And it's sort of like my antidote to the sadness of Poor Dear. It is, I hope, funny. I mean, I laughed a lot when I was writing it. And my publisher, Echo, is marketing it as, they call it a comic noir. And it's about a woman who changes her life in very dramatic ways without being mean about it. There are a few dead bodies along the way. It does play with the noir theme, but she herself is kind of this very nice person, and you still like her at the end, even though it's noir.
All right. That's coming up in about 5 months. It's coming out. Something like that.
Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. It seems far away. So.
Before we let you go, you've talked about a lot regarding this book and the roots of the book and the way it's somewhat autobiographical. Did you write it for you, or did you write it for readers? Did you want them to come away with feeling certain things?
Every book you write, I write anyway, I'm not Stephen King, is speculative. You're writing something that you have no idea is going to resonate or sell or just sit in your drawer. And I definitely had a question I wanted to ask myself and answer, like, can you get over this? Can you learn to forgive? And how does that happen? So that's where it came from, and I'm very grateful that it found a publisher and that it found readers.
Are you a forgiving person yourself?
Not of me. I think of other people. I try to flip that around a little bit. Like, well, why are you okay with that other person doing that thing that you are so mad at yourself for doing? And I think a lot of us are like that we're our own worst enemies.
Are you getting better at that? Are you being more gentle? No.
No.
Not even with this book.
Well, the thing about this book, one thing that it helped me with is to realize how many recurring thoughts I will be like thinking of that bird that ran into my car and died, into the windshield, and like, oh, that poor bird. And it's like there's those things all through my life that I feel bad about. And I try to recognize them now and say, oh, okay, that thing, I don't need to worry about that anymore. But it's hard. It's hard to forgive yourself.
I think there is a beauty in sadness, and even in tragedy. And this book is a remarkable one. And I want to thank you for being here to talk about it. And you're welcome back anytime. Come back, talk about anything you write.
Thank you.
I would love that. I really appreciate that. And Taylor and Chad for choosing this book, for elevating this book. This is the winner of the Kafka Prize of 2025. There's a lot of great books out there. There's a lot of books that our guests know could have won this prize. So maybe check out the full list. But if you want a great read this weekend, pick up Poor Dear by Claire Oshetsky. Thank you, Chad Post. Thanks for reaching out and making this happen.
Thank you for having us on.
And thank you very much, Taylor Thomas. Tell people where to find Archivist Books.
772 Monroe Avenue.
You got anything else fun coming up too, Chad Post?
Oh my God. Yeah, we have, we always have good books. We got a book on a utopia that was built in India called Oroville that's coming out in the not too distant future that I'm very excited about right now.
Utopia?
Yep.
Surprise, we're already living in it. It's great.
It's,
Isn't
it's
it great?
a weird book.
Thank you for being here. And for everyone who has watched on the YouTube channel, thank you for watching. If you've listened all week, if you listen most days, it's great having you. And I hope you're a member of Public Media. This is the last day of our September membership campaign, wxxi.org/give. We would love it if you became a first-time member today. Thank you for supporting it, and we're right back next week. Have a great weekend.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.